the fish who loved the dust. Silas was exploring the rocky shore when he saw something strange. Resting on a warm, flat stone was a fish with shimmering silver scales and sturdy, wide fins. Most fish stayed in the tide pools, but this one was basking in the bright morning sun. Silas reached out his hand, wondering if the little creature was lost or needed help. Silas thought the fish needed to be in the water, so he filled his plastic bucket with cool seawater. He gently scooped the fish up and placed him inside. But instead of swimming, the fish began to cough and sputter. He used his strong fins to climb right back out of the bucket, landing with a soft thud on the dry sand. He looked much happier in the dust than in the water. Silas realized this was no ordinary fish. "I'll call you Finch," Silas whispered. Finch let out a tiny, bubbly chirp and began to waddle across the grass on his fins, moving just like a little puppy. Silas followed him, amazed. Finch didn't have lungs like a person or gills like a trout. He seemed to breathe the fresh garden air with ease. Silas knew that the world could be a tough place for a fish on land. He found an old wooden wagon and lined it with soft green moss and smooth pebbles. "This will be your traveling home," Silas said. Finch hopped into the wagon and wiggled into the moss, looking very comfortable in his new, dry bed. They decided to go on an adventure to the park. The sun was very hot, and Silas noticed Finch's scales were starting to look dull and dry. Silas took out a small striped umbrella and held it over the wagon. He realized that while Finch loved the land, the summer heat could be a challenge for a friend with no fur or feathers to protect him. Suddenly, a neighborhood cat named Pip spotted them from the bushes. Pip had never seen a fish in a wagon before and thought Finch looked like a very interesting snack. The cat crouched low, his tail twitching back and forth as he watched the silver fish resting in the green moss. Silas stepped forward quickly, putting himself between the wagon and the cat. He stood tall and made himself look as big as possible to protect his friend. "No, Pip," Silas said firmly. He stayed right there, guarding the wagon until the cat realized Finch was not for catching. Once Pip the cat wandered away, Silas and Finch found a quiet spot under a big oak tree. Silas shared his snack of crunchy crackers. To his delight, Finch nibbled on the crumbs with gusto. They sat together for a long time, Silas telling stories and Finch listening with his big, unblinking eyes. The sky suddenly turned gray, and heavy raindrops began to fall. Silas saw Finch start to shiver. Most fish love the rain, but Finch was different. Too much water made him feel heavy and cold. The dry land was his home, and the storm was making his mossy wagon soggy and uncomfortable. "Don't worry, Finch. I've got you," Silas cried. He unzipped his bright yellow raincoat and carefully lifted Finch out of the wet wagon. He tucked the fish safely inside the warm, dry pocket of his coat. Silas ran all the way home, keeping his hand over the pocket to make sure Finch stayed dry and secure. Back home, Silas dried Finch off with a soft towel. They spent the evening in the living room, far away from the ocean and the rain. Silas read his favorite book aloud, and Finch rested on a velvet pillow, chirping happily. They were different in many ways, but on the dry, solid ground, they were the very best of friends.